Welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here today with Northrup, who is somebody I had the pleasure of meeting just about a year ago, where I was introduced to her, where she was offering an incredible 3-day workshop called Wide Receiver, which also led us into her signature program, which is called Relax Marie, which is also incredible. And I was just so delighted by the way that she was able to support women to have a new relationship with their finances, with their nervous system, with the way they show up in the world, with the way that their purpose is such a driving force for them and that helps them lean into creating the kind of financial situation that they want and how they can the places inside of themselves that they feel resistant to and get in the way of really being able to have it. Thank you, Kate. That was a great workshop. And I know people got a lot out of it. And we were like, many offers. Yeah, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'd love to start out. It's been fun kind of tracing out a little bit what I can tell from the outside of your journey, just reading Money and Love Story and how in that book, which was when did that get published?
It came out in 2013. So
One teen,
oh,
so well.
I wrote it 13 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And the evolution of your understanding is really apparent. So I would like to talk about that a little bit because I
Cool.
think it's really important for everybody to get this piece, even outside of the specific question about money. But tell us a little bit about what led you up to writing Money and Love Story and what that's like for you.
Yeah. So I was just always interested in money when I was just from the time I was a little girl. I recently found a little brochure that was like an about me brochure that I created in second grade. It said, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I said, I wanted to be an accountant, which is funny for a second grade little girl. I was about 8 when I wrote that. And while I am not an accountant, it definitely pointed to an early interest in money. And so I started my first business when I was 7, and there were many other businesses. But when my parents got divorced when I was 15, 16, at that time, my mom was 50 and she had a really big financial awakening. She realized she had given all financial power and decisions to my dad, just assuming because he was a man, he knew better. And he also comes from money. So she also just assumed, oh, he must know all the things. And then there she was at the age of 50, even though she was an incredibly successful doctor. She had been on Oprah. She had multiple New York Times bestselling books, and yet she realized she knew nothing about money. So she put herself on the financial literacy fast track. And at that time, it was just me and her living together. My sister had gone off to college and my dad had moved out. And I had this proclivity. I was interested. So I started reading all the books alongside her. We read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. We read Catherine Ponder's The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. We read all the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. We did it all. We started going to financial literacy seminars and all kinds of things. And so I was into it. But then when I moved to New York City in my early 20s, I got into a whole bunch of credit card debt because I was spiritually bypassing financial consciousness. And I was doing the act as if game, except I was doing the spend as if game. And so I was spending money in a way that was, I thought, manifesting. I thought I was using the law of attraction, but actually I was just going into credit card debt. And I've had this profound financial avoidance pattern. I never knew how much I made. I never knew how much I spent. I never knew how much I owed. All I was focused on was just making more money. And I thought, erroneously, that if I just made enough money, I wouldn't have to pay attention to my money. The thing is, when we don't pay attention to our money, we actually repel true abundance. Just if we were in a marriage and we wanted to have a more connected, more romantic, beautiful marriage, and we didn't pay any attention to our spouse, we would not have a great marriage. Same with our children, right? And yet that's how I was acting. And so I realized I needed to get it together. And this was in my mid 20s. But all the financial advice I read, all the experts on TV were all the people I read their books. They were like in suits with these like felt very, there's nothing wrong with wearing a suit. However, it felt very finger waggy, shame, blame, guilt. I've been bad. And it quite frankly just felt boring. I just was like, could not get myself engaged because it seemed so boring. And so I created a curriculum for myself that was all the best financial literacy information I could find, all the best financial healing information I could find, and the energetics and the manifesting, but adding in a huge dose of fun and pleasure and the feminine. And using that practice, that curriculum I created, I got myself out of credit card debt. I doubled my savings and I tripled my income within 6 months. And it's not because I met a rich man. I didn't get some fancy job. There was no inheritance. None of those things happened. It was because I changed the way I was relating to money in a profound way. And so that curriculum became my first book, Money, a Love Story.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I'll just say for those of you who don't know her book, it really is like just having Kate give you your own private workshop. You're just there with her and she's okay now, honey, write about this and look into that. It's very receivable. I would say it's really easy to take it in and work with it. And you have an incredible ability to say the hard stuff, but say it in a way that you can really hear, and that's healing, just the way that you offer it, because you're like, "It's okay." So, yeah, you might feel ashamed right now, you might feel embarrassed right now, and it's okay. I always like to say, "No small children are going to die because this is happening," right? Yeah, but you just have a really great way of holding the reader's hand and walking them through this incredible information, which is great. I wanna go back to something earlier that I think it would be really interesting for us to unpack, which is about women's relationship to money and a little bit historically. And you do say in the book that we only got the vote in the 20s, right, in 1920 here in the US, and that is the case. But of course, we have a much longer history of really being the property of the men in our lives, right? And this is a historical fact. And that not only the women, but also our children belong to the men in our lives, which is one of the ways women were manipulated a lot was through their children. And I
That
don't know if
continues to be the case.
I'm sorry?
That continues to be the case.
Yes. So I'm just wondering, just does this old history come up for you when you work with women, this larger perspective? Because I know you talk about systemic issues of racism and sexism and so on. Like you're aware of this. And I just wondered how much of it really arises in your work with people.
It's so important to understand the historical context. And it's so important to understand what our ancestors went through because their genetic programming is encoded into our DNA. So, what I now understand about the nervous system and the way traumas are passed down and also joys are passed down ancestrally through epigenetics is that we are not only living out the unconscious patterns from our own lived experience. We are also living out the histories of the people who came before us, of the women who came before us, and the men as well. But there's some really interesting information about mitochondria and how mitochondria actually come from the maternal line and how they are the energy centers of our bodies and they are the metabolism of our bodies and they're a key integrating factor with the nervous system. So that's we're not gonna go deep into that. I just think it's interesting that we probably are carrying on more of our maternal remembrance than our paternal, perhaps. And understanding that when we feel scared about money, when we feel out of our league, when we have panic come up around survival, around our safety, when we have panic come up around our capability, we come by that really honestly because what we know is that our nervous system is mitigating the vast majority of our behavior. And our nervous system holds the coding and the memory from everyone who has come before us. There's a great study that illustrates this where they took rats in the laboratory and they piped in the smell of cherry blossoms and then they shocked their paws. And then because rats procreate relatively quickly, they have like quick generations, they were able to look at what happened with the great grandbaby rats of those original ones. And with those rats, they piped in the smell of cherry blossoms, and the rats, the great grandbaby rats, had a full on fear response, but no shocking of the pus. So they had no actual lived experience of danger in relationship to the smell of cherry blossoms, and yet they were having a physiological fear response based on that stimulus. So if we think about the histories we know about the women who came before us and their relationship with money, there's a lot there. Not to mention the histories we will never, and their memories around money, around being property, around the safety and security of their children live in us. And it's actually true that when we heal in this lifetime, we heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward because of the science of epigenetics and the way we carry ancestral trauma in our bodies. When we shift that and when we heal in this lifetime, we are literally setting our great grandmothers free and several generations forward.
Mm.
So, financial empowerment for us in our own micro lives is so profound and so healing throughout generations, but then also throughout communities in this lifetime, because what we know about collective healing and collective trauma is that our nervous systems have mirror neurons. And our mirror neurons do this beautiful thing, which is that they don't separate between what's happening to a woman we identify with and what's happening to us. And that can be used in absolutely beautiful ways. And that can be used in ways that are actually really limiting for us. If we witness other women who we identify being harmed because of their financial expansion, being canceled on the internet, being made fun of, being taken down in any way, that actually will register in our own nervous systems as I'm now not safe and it is not safe for me to expand in this way. But similarly, if we are witnessing a woman who we identify with, maybe we share a similar background, maybe we look similar, maybe we have the same career. There's a lot of different reasons that we might identify with somebody. But when we witness that and when we're able to consciously celebrate it and turn on the part of us that knows there is no such thing as separation, like you are me and I am you, then that actually can change the way our DNA is expressed. It actually can change our nervous system programming to literally make it more possible for us to have the lived experience of financial well being, financial mastery, financial confidence. And so it's very important to know the historical context because to me, it lights a fire under our butts in terms of this is about so much more than me and my own life and my own mortgage and like my own net worth. That's wonderful. I want everyone to have a beautiful experience with your own personal finances, but it ripples out so much further. And our healing really is on behalf of all women when we engage in it in that way.
I love that. I love that so much. It reminds me, I heard Alison Armstrong once talk about women like we're aspen trees. Aspen trees all are one tree. They're actually nail trees, but she referred to that they're all one and but with different trunks, right? And she was saying, yeah, it's why when we're in a movie and a woman is healed in the movie, all the women cry. Like we all go, oh, no, we all feel it because we're like in that kind of reciprocity both with whatever's happening on the screen and then the other women in the space. So I totally get that. I love that piece. And it reminds me too of, you're probably familiar with Resma Menaken's work, right? With My Grandmother's Hands. And he really talks about how racism has impacted everybody. Doesn't matter what race assignment you've given, everybody's been really impacted by that. And we're carrying that around with he's doing a lot of that kind of work, healing work also around racism, but they very overlap. And I'm wondering, so when I think about like historically for women, I think one of the big issues I know, and I actually talk about this a fair bit in my book on feminine sovereignty, is about how women learn to be manipulative. Actually, the way that we were able to get some modicum of power and agency was not by being able to be overtly standing up and saying, this
Yes.
is what I believe in and starting their community or whatever, generally speaking, unless they were like Hildegard von Bingen or something. And so we really learned how to gain some kind of power by being manipulative, which I call shadow, the shadow expression of different energies, right? Because we're trying to manipulate or control external circumstances or people, usually in order to feel safe, but also to feel like we might have some agency. And so this is a lot of what we're unraveling right now and trying to heal. And yet it pops up sometimes. And I'll even notice in myself, I've known this for a long time. And I'll notice something. I'll be like, wow, look at how this kind of legacy of that still pops up. Have you seen this in your work with women? Do you talk about this?
I see it come up a lot. So I work with women, but in our program, women are welcome to bring their partner, their romantic partner.
Mm,
And so sometimes that partner is male. And because of traditional gender roles in marriage, and because of the fact that marriage is actually originally an economic institution, not anything about love, there's a lot of shadow in the agreement itself. And what I see
mm,
come up is a lot of lack of truth. And women have been programmed for generations to hide things
mhm,
and to go on a shopping trip and spread it out over multiple credit cards so their husband doesn't know. I'll never forget. So I was making an above average income early. And so in my early 20s, I went on this shopping trip and I should have been putting that money in investments, but I wasn't. So I was shopping. And so I remember going, and I don't remember how much I was spending, but let's just say it was $1,500, which at the time in my life just seemed like astronomical. And I was in there with some older women, and the shopkeeper and these other women were suggesting that I put the purchase on multiple credit cards so that my husband didn't know. And I'm
strategy.
I'm 22, I'm not married, and I was just like, "I'm sorry, what planet have we landed on? Is it 1955 in this store?" But I realized how common that sort of manipulative untruthfulness is in relationship around money with another human, but also with ourselves
Mm,
because of that history, probably of manipulation and the ways that our society was not set up for it to be safe to tell the truth. And so then we have these deep ingrained patterns of not telling the truth to our most intimate partners about money, but then also not telling the truth to ourselves because we think it's too scary or we think we can't handle it or we think that if we tell the truth, if we actually look at the truth of our numbers, that we'll then have to limit ourselves and then we're not free anymore. And so a lack of financial consciousness and just like spending whatever and doing whatever is this rebellious way of claiming a sense of shadowed freedom and shadowed agency, as opposed to
mhm.
actually like getting clear and then decide how much you're going to spend on spas or clothes or whatever in full power.
And what I kind of what I feel in my body when you say that is that we have this opportunity right now to notice when those patterns come up, right? Because they're largely unconscious. You don't really think about them. When they come up, to actually heal that patterning a lot by breaking out, which is obviously what you teach. And I was also thinking about what you said about the way that your parents had worked with money. Because on the one hand, it's a little bit complicated because it's great to share responsibilities in a marriage, right? Was good at this, was good at that. It's great. We do that. But layered on top of that is all this cultural stuff about the man should take care of the money. And I grew up in a family where both of my parents, actually, I think my mother managed the money more than my dad did, but my dad made all the money. And so she was the one. I remember the ledgers that she had and that whole thing, and she was always really proud of the fact that she would balance everything to the penny. Like she really liked that. And she was very good at that orientation and budgeting and things like that. But she never became financially empowered herself.
Yeah.
And actually, my parents had a breakdown in their marriage when I was 13. And this was 1972. And it was before she could get a credit card in her
Yep.
own name. I think you mentioned that in the book, like something
Yeah.
about your grandma, right? The
1975 was the
1975.
year.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a big kind of impact for me at the time. I was 13. I didn't really know about that. But somewhere in my psyche, I made a decision that I would not be dependent on a man for money. I was just like, I'm not going to end up in the situation that my mom's in. I'm like, it's not going to happen. And so there was a lot that was empowering about that decision in the sense that it really was like, okay, you're going to go out into the world, you're going to create your career, you're going to create financial stability for yourself. There was a lot that was empowering about it,
Yes.
but it's also limiting. And it also has made it hard for me sometimes to be able to receive support, right? To work that actually help me with that. And I think that this is something you also have unpacked a bit. So I'd love to hear your
Oh my
perspective.
gosh. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought this up. And I
And just
want
to
to
say
say,
before you answer,
yeah.
I think you said once, I saw it in an email, it's, I'm a feminist, you're a feminist. It's not about attacking feminism. It's just
No,
looking
but
the
there's different
negative
ways that
consequences.
totally. And there's different ways that I think, like anything, feminism has a shadow
Mm,
and can serve us or not in certain ways. And to me, feminism is loving women and being pro the support of women's thriving. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for me? And one of the things that I see that is the shadow of feminism is exactly what you've just described, which is, and I watched my mom go through her divorce and in the end, it was an incredibly empowering time for her, but there was a lot of fear and there was some scrambling and there were some years where she was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put my kids through college. And it was scary. And I too made a decision. Oh, I will never let a man make all the financial decisions because I don't want to end up in that situation. And then cut to me dating men who had money issues for decades because I was like, rather than end up with a man who could potentially ever even support me, how about I just date ones who couldn't ever so I don't even have to worry? So these
I
things
hear you.
these things show up in all sorts of interesting ways. But ultimately, I also want to say I agree that it's really important to have household roles and responsibilities and delegation. So I'm all about getting clear. Like, I don't take out the trash, for example. I'm not involved with the trash. The trash is not my department. I will put a fresh bag in there if my kid's taking out the trash. Mike really doesn't order groceries. Like, I'm in charge of making sure there's food in the house and I'm on groceries. That's great in terms of a division of labor. But I don't need to, for my own personal relationship with power, have a relationship with the garbage in my house. Mike doesn't need to, for his own relationship with his personal power, have a relationship with the groceries being in the fridge. Those things are like so basic. Money is different. Both people have to have an intimate relationship with the money. Money is not like the trash or like groceries, where it can just be somebody else's department. And if a woman is fully thinking she's delegated the money and that someone else is handling it, whether it's her husband, her wife, her partner, her child, her financial advisor, it's the same thing as saying, oh, my doctor is taking care of my health. No, you are taking care of your health because you live in your body. Your doctor is there as an advisor from time to time. So with our money, if we are not engaging with it, we are missing out on such an opportunity to learn who we truly are. I had this kind of mysterious belief, semi-conscious belief or desire really that I would just meet, which was of course, as I'm saying this, in direct opposition with the decision I had made to never need to be taken care of by a man. But I also had a simultaneous unconscious desire to just meet somebody who could just save me and figure it all out for me. But I'm so glad I didn't, because if I had, I would have never known what I'm made of. And I know, even though my husband and I are business partners and we are in complete financial partnership, and we have been able to create so much more together than either of us could have apart. I also know that if anything were to happen, I've got this. And so I think that's the piece that we need to hold close around. It's a both and. It's not a, oh, I never need a man, or, oh, let me be completely taken care of financially. It's a dance between the two so that we can both create and receive, because we're really designed for both.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think I want to just unpack a little bit more why we resist it so much. Why
Why
women,
is money?
no,
No,
the
the receiving.
managing money, like paying
Oh,
attention to money,
I have thought.
managing the money, all of that. I think that there's been some strides in terms of making money,
I think
right?
so too.
Right? There've been more and I know for me, that was what I always did. I was always just focused on making
Yes.
money. Just make more money
Yes.
and it'll all be fine, which is true, but not really.
Not really. So here's the analogy that I like to use, because it is the most common myth amongst high achieving women that if you just make enough money, everything will be handled, that like money is the solution to your financial problems. Here's the thing. If you have a bucket with a bunch of holes in it and you pour water into the bucket, all you're going to get is water leaking out faster. You will never fill the bucket. And so when we lack two things, both the internal infrastructure and nervous system somatic capacity to feel safe with money and to feel powerful with money, that's one system that we need to build. And then once we have more of that on board, then we have this capacity and ability and energy to create easeful, easy to manage external financial systems. It, we listen, this very same reason that I had trouble in my mid-20s getting it together financially was because all the financial experts were just like so freaking boring. I'll tell you what, financial accounting is the only class that I struggled with in college. I graduated magna cum laude, and my financial accounting grade was the one thing that brought my GPA down. It's just, it's not taught in a fun way. I was just like, what is this? Credits and debits? It's not even, doesn't even make sense. The thing is, money is actually not complicated. If you can do sixth grade math, you can absolutely be a complete money goddess. And it is not complex. But what I believe and know to be true is that the quote unquote powers that be have purposefully made it sound complicated to keep particular people out of power. And those particular people are women and people of color for the most part. And that's been a systemic issue that continues to run under the surface of the financial world. And it's why there's all this BS financial jargon that makes it sound hard, and it's not. And so that's why I add in fun and pleasure, because what fun and pleasure does is it makes us it makes this whole experience feel available to us. And it helps us to signal to our nervous system, this is safe. So if you see a middle-aged white man sitting behind a big desk in a suit, I instantly am just, it doesn't feel like, I'm just being honest. I know what you're saying. Like, I don't want to go to that meeting. He doesn't seem fun. I'm also intimidated. Maybe I'm not smart enough. It brings up all my daddy issues. But if we can signal to our nervous system at each of these thresholds of financial consciousness that we are safe, and there's a number of different practices, of course, that I teach around that in Relaxed Money and in my free workshops and on my podcast. It's everywhere. There are ways to rewire yourself so that money feels really safe, and not only safe, actually like a joy. I went from completely avoiding my money 2 decades ago, more than 2 decades ago. No, about 2 decades ago, to my money date every week with my money and my husband is one of my favorite parts of the week. I look forward to it. We have the best time. It's so great. It's so great. And the more we put attention on the money we already have, the more magnetic we become to more, because money is an energy. I believe money is a consciousness. And just if you were dating and you seemed completely unavailable and avoidant, it would be hard to find good people who would want to date you. Money is the same. If money's, oh, look over there. She does these money dates. She's got this great system set up. She's got her app. She's got her cash flow. It's joyful. It's pleasurable. I'm going to go over there because she's got a great setup for me. She's got a great home for me. I'm going to her house. And so that's how money is. So you want to take care of it first, and then more tends to show up, as opposed to the opposite, which is we think, I'll just make more money and then I won't have to worry about taking care of it. There will never be a moment where you make enough money that you don't have to think about your money anymore.
Yes, exactly. And you know what that reminds me of too, Kate, is like how culture tends to say that girls aren't good with math, right? Girls aren't good with math, girls aren't good at science. I think we've unpacked that a little bit. I think there's still a thing about that. And I think that translates into not being good with money.
But also, I just want to be fully transparent. I got a very high score on my SATs in language and a very low score on my SATs in math. I, to this day, could not do long division. I'm not naturally good at calculating numbers, but I'm really good with money. Because if you can do basic math, you can be great with money. It's not complicated. Adding and subtracting. That's literally it.
Yeah. See, and that's really great to underscore, because I think that what you're saying about it's not actually not complicated, but our perception is that it is. And I think that does maybe come from a little bit of, oh, math is really complicated or science is really
Yeah.
complicated and all of that.
Yeah, like money doesn't have anything to do with calculus.
Exactly. Or even geometry or
It's even
trig.
geometry. I'm also terrible at geometry. And I'm not trying to highlight the belief that women are not good with numbers. I'm just telling you I'm not, but I
Right.
am good with money.
And I'm talking about this as a cultural,
Totally. I
mantra
think
out
that's
there.
another tool of patriarchy that is subtly continuing to chip away at women's agency. Because if you can convince a group of people that they are not good at something, you don't have to do anything to keep them out of trying. They just stop trying themselves.
Yes, exactly. And we are breaking out of that, but
Oh, yeah.
it's very topsy-turvy these days. It's a little bit
Yeah.
chaotic out there.
It
So
is strange
it
times.
it is strange time. I do
Mhm.
wanna circle back to that a little bit, but I wanted to just make a note of something. I just wanna let our viewers know that Kate was generous enough to let me look at her human design chart, and which is always really fun for me. And I don't know if you know this, Kate. How well do you know your chart very well, or is it
I don't know it's super. I know I'm a manifesting generator. I know my lines are 3-5. I know I'm a sacral authority. But other than that, I really don't know much.
let me tell you a couple of really beautiful things
Cool.
about your
I
chart.
have my notebook. I just might write down a few notes. So if I'm looking down, that's what's
And
going on.
I could send you the recording so you
Okay,
can
great.
hear it. But yeah, I wanted to highlight a few things because I think that it really does give you a foundation for what I've seen you do as your work in the world. The number one thing I want to say is that your sun, your conscious sun, what we call the conscious sun, which is where the sun was when you were born, it's related to where your sun sign in astrology. And so your conscious sun is in the gate 25, which is on the G center. The G center is what we think of as the heart. According to the lore of human design, the heart chakra split into two at the end of the 18th century, and we ended up with the G center and then the will center. And so the G center is the center for love and lovability, identity, and direction. And what we call in human design your incarnation cross, which is a purpose that will just unfold for you, but it's also
Mm.
something you can explore more. And your 25 is a part of that, but they're all on the G center. All the gates are in the heart, and you have what we call the vessel of love
Mm.
as your incarnation cross, which is so beautiful.
Oh,
So your heart's all lit up.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And so the 25 is the gate of the love of spirit. And so I know that you love to teach about money and you love to teach about the nervous system. But I've heard you say it's really about the divine, right? It's about
It's really about the divine.
it's really
About source.
it's about how we connect in, and money's an energy. And so the more that and that energy really just takes on the patina of the interpretation that we put on it, right?
Mhm.
But at its core, it's just energy like all other energies. But I wanted to point this out to you because I didn't know but you have the complete channel that connects the will center to the G center. And the will center it's a motor. It's actually your connection between that and your throat is what makes you a manifesting generator. But the will center is also the center for love, the center for worthiness and money. And
Hmm.
so this is where we find a lack of self-worth. And we often find when women have issues, actually anybody has issues with money, a lot of times it's happening in that will center. You, you've actually got it supercharged because it's connected to your heart through this wonderful channel called the channel of the priest or the priestess or the shaman.
Hmm.
And it's also known as the channel of initiation.
Oh, wow.
And so it is about being able to initiate people into higher consciousness through this wonderful
Cool.
connection of the two parts of the heart.
That's
So
really cool.
that's a really beautiful core energy that you
I
have.
love that.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other piece, which is related to it, there's always so much I could just sit here and talk about your chart for well, however long. But the other piece I wanted to mention is also from the will center. So the will center is over here. I think of the will center as being a place where the physical heart is a little bit on the left side, and then the G center is
Yeah.
right smack in the middle. But they're
Okay.
very connected. And the will center is a power for the heart, and then the heart is that love and lovability, right? And identity, who we feel we are, right? Who you think you are. But then you also have a connection through what's called the money line in a traditional human design that goes from the will center directly to the throat. And it's a in traditional human design, you have the gate 45, your moon is there, which is what drives you. And it's the gate of the king or the queen or the sovereign.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's been in quantum human design, it's been renamed distribution because really this channel is all about resources. So
Cool.
the initial gate, the 21, which is actually where my son is all about managing resources. I like to call it stewardship because if we eat
Yes, I use that word all the time. It's the word.
yeah, and it was known as the CEO gate. It was like the person who could do that. But to me, I wanted to elevate it to stewardship because I feel
Love
like
that.
that's a higher octave of that same kind of ability to manage resources. But
Yeah.
then that queen gate or the sovereign gate is the one that really distributes them. Ideally, you
Mhm.
do have a power at the top. The best thing for it to do is to be really good at distributing resources.
Yes.
And just well, side note, so I was just in Costa Rica and I heard a story about the president who in I think it was 1949, he actually took power as a kind of benevolent dictator. And he's the one who abolished the military and made building infrastructure, education, and healthcare, universal education and health,
Mhm.
number one priority of the country. And then he stepped down again and allowed the democracy to come. And I was like, that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? So
We
like
could
well,
maybe use a little bit of that.
my thoughts exactly, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of an example of how
Oh,
somebody can step into that. If we want
yeah.
to just call it sovereign, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
benevolent dictator. Our words authoritarian and dictator,
Yeah.
and we don't like so much, but this kind
Totally.
of okay, this person is, I know what needs to be done. I know what's good for the whole people, right? Because this is tribal energy and human design. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to set it up. Now, of course, people could have taken it apart later if they really wanted to, right?
Sure.
But I think he was just like, let's just cut to the chase.
Let's do this.
So I think that's a great example of
Wow.
this empowered expression of that 21, that money line, that 2145, where we're gathering resources, right? The tribe has resources. We're gathering them, we're managing them, and then we're saying, okay, so you're just a couple, so you get a goat. You have 4 children, you get a cow. It's more important that everybody has what they need than that everybody has the same thing, which is
Yeah.
tend is equality.
Totally. Totally. So the difference between equity and equality. And what I also want to
Exactly.
point out that I think is really helpful because folks who have big hearts can often find themselves, especially spiritual people, find themselves thinking like, if I have more than enough, or if I have abundance, that means someone else is going to automatically suffer. Now, what's important to understand is that there are actually enough resources on the planet for everyone to live a good life. There actually are. So if you are doing well financially, it doesn't have to mean that someone else is automatically suffering. And I just find it really helpful to understand that there actually are enough resources for everyone to live a good life. And our suffering doesn't automatically mean that someone else, there's so many other powers at play that create the lack of good distribution. And one of those powers is the lie of scarcity. Because when we're operating under a lie of scarcity, that can create a hoarding issue because greed is fundamentally rooted in the lie of scarcity that says there's not enough to go around. So therefore, let me get mine and keep it. And actually, when we open up into the truth that there's more than enough to go around, we can really open our palms and be part of that stewardship, be part of the flow, be part of the giving and receiving, and really be in trust that it's like we're a giant pipe system and it's all just flowing through and blessing our life and then going on to bless the lives of the next person. And that's why I think about like getting more money actually in the hands of women and conscious people, because the data shows us that when more money is in the hands of women, entire communities heal. Everyone gets the education they need, everyone gets the health care that they need. All sorts of well being outcomes increase across the board when women are in financial power. We just have the data to show this. And so I think it's really important if you are a woman listening to know that you getting resources, it really does have a tendency to make everyone else's life better as well.
Yeah, of course, which is a motivator for a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because we also don't wanna definitely, like, diminish, right, other people.
Not at
So,
all.
so I would love just sharing this little bit with you. I when I saw your chart, I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's so on target. You're so on
Thank
purpose
you
with
for
what you're
that.
doing." Yeah, yeah, and just to I would love to hear what your perspective on sovereignty is. Sovereignty is something I've been working with since 1998, back when people were like, "What do you mean, like, the king?" They had no idea what I was talking about, and I was like, "Okay." And so it's been something that's really been brewing in me for a long time, but now it's really become, like, a term that people are using,
Yeah.
but people use it in different ways. So I'd love to hear excuse me. I would love to hear what your take on sovereignty is.
To me, sovereignty means agency, means choice, means personal power, as opposed to power over. It's really a sense of I have my own connection to source. That's a direct line. I don't need it to be mitigated through anyone else. And I have the ability to connect in with the truth with a capital T at any time. And I have the wherewithal to set boundaries, the wherewithal to say yes and to say no about what is right for me on my path with my direct connection to source.
Mhm.
So that to me is what sovereignty is. And one of the reasons that I love working through the lens of nervous system healing is that a healthy nervous system really has the suppleness to be able to move back and forth and in and out of a parasympathetic and a sympathetic response and be able to respond with resiliency to the stimulus of being alive and be able to be filled with aliveness. And one of the things that we know is that nervous system injuries happen mostly when there was a feeling of a lack of agency. So a feeling of
Mhm.
not having a choice, of too much, too soon, too fast, not enough support, and really feeling like I don't have choice here. And so bringing our learning to heal our nervous system, learning to feel safe in our bodies so that it changes the way we walk in the world so that we feel choice in any given moment, choice about how we're going to respond, choice about what we're going to do with our money, choice about are we going to say yes? Are we going to say no? Bringing back agency, bringing back our sovereignty actually is the healing agent to the wounded parts that did not
Mm.
feel they had a choice historically, not only our own parts, but also those of our ancestors. So to me, sovereignty is the ultimate medicine because when we feel we have choice, we are in our personal power. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I would consider that personal sovereignty, right?
Yes.
It's about the person being able to claim and cultivate her own sovereignty. And the first four pillars of feminine sovereignty in my book are all about that. It's not, I don't talk about it in terms of nervous system healing in the same way, but I really use Kundalini yoga and a lot of breath work and a lot of movement and a lot of kind of pointed yogic technology which is doing this is similar things.
Yes.
It's coming from a
Totally.
different place, but it's doing the same thing. So I love
Amazing.
that. And then for me, what I had this epiphany really in it was during the pandemic. It was after George Floyd was murdered. And I was watching what was sweeping through the world in response to that. And I actually never thought I would see that in my lifetime. It was very powerful to see the number of people who were waking up to the systemic racism that was like on all the videos. So you're like, wow, there it is.
Yeah.
And because I'd always been really working on an individual personal sovereignty path. And then what I realized was is we develop personal sovereignty so that what? And I
Mhm.
started really leaning into that. And what came up was so that we can become agents of a more feminine ethic for our world, that it can become more equitable, more caring, more compassionate, more generous, all of those things. So it wasn't meant to be, even though I do focus on women have always been more attracted to me, it
Mhm.
wasn't meant to be like this is just for women.
Yeah.
It's really about the qualities of this. And so what those pillars focus on is purpose and contribution, which I know you also focus
Mhm.
on, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. But then communication that connects, which I feel like even just the way you wrote your book is very much like that. Like you have a way of like really connecting with your reader there. And then collaboration, our ability to actually work together and then become stewards. Because ultimately, this is what our world is calling us. It's okay, people. Yeah, we need you to become stewards of the planet rather than consumers of the planet.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm wondering how that lands for you.
I love that. And I think it really connects back to what we were just talking about, which is that more money in the hands of conscious people, more resources of any kind, it doesn't have to be financial, allows those resources to be directed in a way that is regenerative, that is thinking through the entire system. So not just what's happening on my block, but what happens once it leaves my block? What happens to the full cycle of any kind of consumer good? What happens in my world when someone comes in as a customer and then goes over here and then goes over here? What's the before experience? What's the during? What's the after? And how's that then connecting to the next cycle that is being able to be fed into? So it's really moving from an extractive model and the lie that everything is a zero sum, that like if one person wins, one person loses. That's just not true. Where when we're looking at sovereignty in the collective, it's much more about training ourselves. And it is a training, it is a rewiring of our consciousness to always look for opportunities to pour back into the system. Always look for opportunities where it can be a win, a triple bottom line. And it just requires asking better questions. And what asking better questions requires is that we are doing the practices that you're talking about, that I'm talking about, that create a physical experience of safety so that we can access a greater degree of our consciousness, a greater degree of our ability to think in new ways, to feel other people's hearts, to be in coherence, and to be a walking thermostat for the kind of world that we are desiring to see. Our energetic blueprint, our frequency is part of that. And then also not only how we move in the world, but the actions we're taking become extensions of that as well.
Exactly, exactly. And when we are operating as sovereign beings, right? We've done our inner work or we're in the process of doing our inner work. We're taking responsibility for our lives. We're doing what we can do. And then we see other people as being sovereign, of being, even if they're not exhibiting it at the moment or they might not quite feel it, but just to hold that space for them
Yes.
that you're a sovereign being, you're a divine child of the universe, like just to hold that for them and then see how do we then navigate our communication and our working together when we really hold each other in that way. And actually, Pillar 7 is mutually beneficial collaborations, just to say that. It's just that same thing as like how, because of course, we've been involved in collaborations forever. We can't live without collaborating,
Yeah.
but are they mutually beneficial or have they been more negotiated for the benefit of some as opposed to others? So, how do we actually break out of that? Because I think that in coming out of this age of empire, because after all, scarcity is a foundation of Western culture. It's actually one of the foundations of the whole shebang, which I know a lot of, oh no, really? But it's true, right? And it's like Rome was the one, they didn't make it up, but they sure were good at promoting it and spreading it around the world, right? But that, and they created a kind of scarcity through taxation and through all of that, right? And it's something that we've just been with for the last, whatever, 2,500 years. And so I think that, again, just helping us to navigate the ways we feel scarce inside. I don't have enough. I'm not enough. I don't have enough
Yes.
energy. I don't have enough intelligence. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough, whatever, all those things, right? All of that. And then how does that influence our relationship to each other? But
Yes.
what step into that sense of sovereignty, right? It's, oh, I am whole in myself. And yes, I'm continuing to grow. And no, I don't have to know everything or be perfect or anything, but I can have that. It gives us a really different platform to be able to just move out into the world. And then also, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier about how, like, when one woman is healed, it heals all of us. It's like when one of us exhibits our sovereignty and works that way, it gives others a model and permission to be able to do that, right? There's this energetic transference that can happen just
Yes.
by us doing that and also assuming that of somebody, not in a coercive way, but just in, I'm just going to assume that you're whole and you're perfect just the way
Mhm.
that you are. And then
Yeah.
how to interact.
Yes. And when we interact with people in that way, it calls forth the part of them that is that way already.
Exactly.
So powerful.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And I feel like this is a great foundation for us as moving forward. And I wanted to come back to this purpose and contribution question because I really love what you say in the Money a Love Story book, which is about how there were multiple things, but one is that unless you really have kind of your money situation handled, it's really hard to fully commit to your purpose and your contribution. Right. And that it also liberates you to explore that in a even more expanded way, have a bigger sense of what's possible and what you can do in the world. And I'm just wondering what kind of take you might have. We were just mentioned a little bit earlier, like the world's kind of pretty chaotic right now, right? There's a lot of things that are shifting and moving around. And I know that purpose is shifting for a lot of people, right? What is our purpose? And just how do we show up in this world with that kind of resilience? And yes, the whole the nervous system thing, but then also looking at how are we contributing? I think a lot of us are going, gosh, maybe I need to not be so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, but instead, how am I contributing to something that's helping to heal our world? So I just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, there was this book that I was aware of, which I didn't actually read, but it's called like, How Am I Going to Change the World When I Can't Even Find My Keys? And it's a book about personal organizing. And so I think about that as an analogy, we can use the same kind of idea for our personal finances to say, okay, if we are running an overdraft, if we are having our finances behind the scenes a bit of a mess or just not a match for the level of human we know we are, that creates a low grade leak energetically. It's almost like static on the line. of our ability to be full channels for our purpose, full in magnetism for opportunities that are meant for us, fully connected to the divine. So to me, it's you're almost on the radio station, but and so I'm a huge believer in doing things behind the scenes that may not look that sexy in the storefront window, but that create a feeling of profound foundational strength so that when we do show up in our purpose, and it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? It's not, oh, first you have to get it completely together behind the scene, then you can step into your purpose. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. And that's actually like a very classic 0 or 10 or black or white thinking. Trauma response thinking is very like this or that. No, it can be both at the same time, right? Like, I am in my purpose and I am also tending to my finances and empowering myself there. But in terms of our purpose, I know that we are all here serving very different roles on the transition team. I believe we all incarnated at this time for a particular reason. We are here for this time, and we came here prepared to be alive during this time. And the more we can show up as sovereign beings in our wholeness, in our full power, in our connection to the divine, the more we can really do our part. But what's very tricky is the internet and like the world at large, which makes it seem like, oh, maybe her purpose should be my purpose. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm not doing it in the right way. Maybe I should be shouting louder. Maybe I should be shouting quieter. Maybe I should be talking about this issue or that issue, that issue. Part of sovereignty and that direct connection to source is knowing when we are on purpose and when we are, and that is between us and God. So what drives me insane about the world we're in and performative anything is that some folks who are not operating in their full sovereignty decide that it's their job to tell other people what their role is and whether or not they're doing a good job. And we're not so much in that era anymore, but we definitely were 2020, 2021, a little bit into 2022. I'm glad that it seems collectively we're graduating from, instead of doing my own work, let me look at other people and tell them how they should be doing it. But I really want to say our role, our purpose, our contribution is an inside. You're only going to get the message from inside or from God or however you receive that message. That's the only place it's coming from. And that is the only metric for whether you're on track or not, is that connection to source. And no one else can ever tell you if you're spot on or not.
I love that. I love that. I like to think of purpose as is more of a verb than a noun. I often talk about feeling on purpose, which is enthusiasm. The old definition of enthusiasm is that which makes the God within you dance. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
What makes that part of you just be like, oh yeah. So it's more about that. It's more, and I was thinking about this earlier today because I think a lot of times people still have the programming around purpose is like what you do.
Yeah.
Which is very related to human doing. We're human doings. We're doing. My purpose must be doing. And we're realizing, no, it's like more about who we being. And so purpose is about who you're being. It's more about how you're experiencing yourself, how you're expressing yourself, how you're interacting with people. And that, what is that God within you doing? Is she dancing or is she sleeping or is she upset or whatever? Is she ignored? Is she paid attention to? And really cultivating just like cultivating your relationship with money, right? It's cultivating that relationship with that kind of inner spirit within you let's go this way. Let's move this way. And it's not about, because I think so many of us were programmed. I think this is breaking down, but I certainly I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and I was very much programmed with this idea that you got a career and you did your career and you did that thing your whole life. And that just is not true. Most people don't do that. And I think it was like this little window where that happened for people. It was like from post World War II to maybe 1975. It was like this one period, right? And yet the mythology of that is deeply embedded in a lot of people's psyches. Oh, if I could just find the right job, I'll feel on purpose. So I'm glad we're really unpacking this and unraveling it, because it's my experience is most people don't find it that way at all.
No. And I will say I've been doing so pretty much more or less the same career since my late 20s. And there are times that I have felt really on purpose and times that I haven't, doing fundamentally the same thing.
Mhm. Although, and I do want to wind up with this, there's a one question, which is the evolution that you had from having a little bit more of a psychological focus that you have in the book to the nervous system healing that you have now. Because I think that this is also a part of the trajectory that is happening for a lot of us. And there's so much more focus now on trauma and nervous system healing than there used to be, which I find very positive. But if you could just share a little bit about your own evolution of that, because now it seems like you're really much more focused on the nervous system healing than you are like on the psychology, like our money story. It's still useful to get in
Absolutely.
touch with that, but that's just maybe a foundation. But really,
Yeah.
how we heal is more through the nervous system healing.
Well, I had the experience of realizing the degree to which I was unconsciously stuck in patterns of stress and pressure financially. And no amount of being conscious of that, like no amount of thinking was going to change it. I kept finding myself in the same situation again, where and again. And what I now know from years of study and practice is that by the time we're having a conscious thought, by the time we're even aware of a belief, there has been a whole cacophony of physiological responses that originate in the nervous system and in our survival brain. Why our brain and our nervous system are the nervous system. So it's not that it's only the body or only the brain. It's like the whole, and this is back to it's not separate, right? Like our mind and body are not separate. It's as a whole entity. And I think that what the psychological focus does is says it's about the mind. It's your mindset. It's just in your mind. It's your thoughts. And it's this assumption that our neural programming and our thoughts and beliefs and our memories only live in the brain. And that's just not true. There are neurons in our heart. There are neurons in our gut. There is significant evidence that cells all throughout our body hold memory. And so it's just really understanding that when we use a bottom up approach that uses a feeling experience, like a sensory physiological experience to change our state, then our thoughts tend to change on their own. And then we don't
Mm.
have to police our thoughts. And then suddenly we're having a whole new experience of a different behavior without having had to consciously override ourselves. But instead, we've come up against an edge. We've signaled safety to our body with a physical practice, bottom up approach. And then suddenly there's so much more capacity, and we see the world in a completely different way than we did 3 minutes ago. And it's not because we changed a thought. Like that's a very surface level approach. And it can be helpful. But what we know is that 80% of the information traveling between our brain and our body is traveling from our body to our brain. And only 20% is traveling from our brain to our body. Did I say that? Yeah. Great.
Mhm.
Something yes. And so it's just more efficient and effective to make the change on a felt level and then send the signal to our brain that way.
I love that. I think that's so liberating. Like, I remember when I was introduced to affirmations, it was when I was making my way out of I used to be an Ivy League professor, that was my first career, and I made my way out in a network marketing company, and
That
I know, when I read your story about the network I was like, "Yeah, that really that liberated me." But I was introduced at that time to affirmations, and I was really perplexed at that time. I was like, "You know what? This works really great for certain things in my life, and it doesn't touch other things, like, at all." And so I've spent a lot of time since then, because that was whatever, 25 years ago, really being like, why is that? What is that about? But, and you just said it like really clear. It's like, we have to get in and change what's happening in the body not before, but it really facilitates.
Yeah, it's a quickening agent. It's a fertilizer. If you're growing tomatoes, why wouldn't you use fertile soil? Why wouldn't you add in the nutrients, the great organic and like compost? Like, why wouldn't you do that? And it just makes it so that the change happens more easily, more effectively, and more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yay for nervous system healing. So we're going to wrap up here. Kate, is there anything else you would like to say to people? I do want to just say that you all should go and check out Good with Money, which is happening in April. So we will have links to that in the description and the show notes for you to find out about that. Do go check it out. It's really great. And you'll get so much out of that. And if it feels right to you, I encourage you to go ahead and say yes to Relaxed Money too, because I think it is a really comprehensive and gentle and yet deep and rich way of really rejiggering your relationship to money and being able to do that in a way that's pleasurable and expansive and fun. So that's coming up. But Kate, anything you'd like to say as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah. What a phrase came to me at the end of last year, which is making good money doesn't make you good with money. And all the things that we've been talking about here are really not everything, but they're very interrelated to it's one thing to be a good earner. It's an entirely other skill set to be good with your money, to be a sovereign steward of resources. And that's the conversation we're having. That is the conversation about true power and being an extension of divine consciousness here on planet Earth, all the way in and all the way through. And so I want to call forth those folks who are ready for that deepening to know, oh, yeah, there's more available for me. And I know that part of that is deepening in my financial consciousness and my financial stewardship. And just knowing that can really be a direct extension of your divine connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that. And I do feel that women becoming empowered around money and not just making money, but managing money. I think maybe that was one of like our first wave. With the let's just make money. And Gloria Steinem saying we're becoming the men that we wanted to marry. But a lot of those men had heart attacks. So we need to do better with our money.
Totally.
So that we
Totally.
don't go that
And
way.
get
Right.
off the hamster wheel of more and more, which is still part of really unconscious capitalism.
Exactly. Exactly. It's one of the things I love that you're like, this isn't about really how much money you have. It's about how you manage the money you have. And if you want to make more, great. There's these ways to make more, but it's also just about how stop those leaky buckets, right? And let them fill up and then decide where it goes. Okay. So Kate, where can people find you? KateNorthrup.com?
KateNorthrup.com is a great place. At Kate Northrup is my Instagram. And of course, yeah, head over. I would definitely recommend come join in for Good with Money. It's a free workshop I only do once a year. And at the end of 3 days, you will have begun to directly rewire your nervous system to feel safer with money and to become a magnet for even more abundance and opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. That totally happened with me with Wide Receiver. So I would highly recommend that people do that. So thanks everybody for checking us out today. And please do share this with the people in your life that you feel would really benefit from it. And thank you, Kate, for being here. It's been lovely to chat with you. I'd love to hear your perspective. And I know it's going to really inspire and enlighten a lot of our viewers and our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. This was so great.
Okay. Bye, everyone.